The humidity of Riverport clung to Ethan like a second skin, thick and unwelcome. 3 weeks into his new junior analyst job, the city still felt alien, a maze of unfamiliar streets navigated via a sputtering public bus system that seemed to operate on its own whimsical schedule. His tiny downtown apartment swallowed most of his paycheck, leaving precious little for luxuries or necessities like reliable transportation. His aging hatchback hadn't even survived the drive down from his hometown, sighing its last mechanical breath somewhere on I-75. Now, the hour-long multi-transfer bus ride to the office was rapidly eroding his sanity and punctuality. He needed a car, desperately and cheaply. After 2 weekends of fruitless searching, yielding only overpriced rust buckets or suspiciously clean lemons, frustration gnawed at him. Online listings blurred together. Then he saw it. A small ad for Gus's budget wheels on the industrial outskirts of town. It wasn't promising, but it was something. The lot was a sun-baked patch of cracked asphalt populated by weary-looking vehicles. Gus himself, a man whose smile didn't quite reach his eyes, gestured vaguely towards the back row. And there it sat, a 15-year-old sedan, a faded blue color, unremarkable except for its price tag, which was almost too good to be true. It had dents, sure, and the upholstery was worn, but Gus assured him it ran like a top. Ethan's gut flickered with unease. The price felt too low, but the thought of another Monday morning wrestling with the bus schedule quickly extinguished the doubt. He haggled briefly, more out of obligation than hope, and Gus readily agreed. The paperwork was swift. The keys, surprisingly heavy, dropped into his palm. Relief washed over him, tinged with a faint metallic taste of desperation. The sedan groaned slightly as Ethan turned the key, the engine catching with a rattling cough before settling into a surprisingly steady idle. He pulled out of Gus's lot onto the main road. The simple act of driving his own car again, feeling like a small victory. He cracked the windows, trying to air out the peculiar smell inside. A musty, metallic tang, like old coins left out in the rain. It wasn't overpowering, just persistent. He fiddled with the radio, ancient knobs clicking under his fingers. He scanned through stations, static, a blast of country music, more static, then paused as a wash of white noise hissed from the speakers. For just a second, underneath the fuzz, he thought he heard a faint, sibilant whisper, like wind, through dry leaves. Shaking his head, dismissing it as interference from the nearby industrial yards, he switched the radio off. Later, parked in the dim light of his apartment building's assigned spot, he decided to give the interior a quick once-over. He slid the driver's seat back to vacuum, and his hand brushed against something cool and hard, wedged deep in the track mechanism. Curious, he worked it free. It was a small, tarnished silver locket, heart-shaped, etched with delicate, faded floral patterns. It felt strangely cold in his palm, colder than the surrounding metal. An unexpected shiver traced its way up his spine, a prickling sense of unease that had nothing to do with the car's age or questionable history. Just an old piece of forgotten jewelry, he told himself, dropping it into the glove compartment. Just new car jitters, mixing with the slightly depressing reality of owning a 15-year-old budget ride. A few evenings later, Ethan was driving back from a mandatory late-night team dinner at work. The initial awkwardness had faded into tired relief, and he was looking forward to crashing in his apartment. He took a secondary route, a winding road flanked by dark woods that shaved 10 minutes off his commute, though it was less traveled and poorly lit. Streetlights were sparse here, casting long dancing shadows from the trees onto the asphalt. He hummed along to a song playing softly on his phone. He hadn't bothered with the car radio since that first day. Without warning, a loud metallic clunk echoed through the cabin. All 4 door locks slammed down simultaneously. Ethan frowned, hand instinctively going to the driver's side lock switch. He flicked it up, Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. He pushed the unlock button on the key fob. No response. A cold knot began to tighten in his stomach. He reached over and tried the passenger door handle, locked solid. Back to his own, pulling firmly. It wouldn't budge. His heart started hammering against his ribs. Okay, just a fuse maybe, he muttered, trying to keep his voice steady, the sound swallowed by the car's sudden oppressive silence. But the dashboard lights glowed normally. His headlights cut through the darkness outside, and the engine hummed along as if nothing was wrong. He was miles from the busier main road, surrounded by dark, silent trees. A wave of claustrophobia washed over him, the feeling of being trapped intensifying with each passing second. He fumbled with the lock switch again, uselessly. He was sealed. And just as real panic began to set in, a second, equally loud click resonated. The lock sprang up. Ethan gasped, yanking the handle. The door opened. He didn't pull over immediately. Adrenaline urged him forward, away from that particular stretch of lonely road. He drove the rest of the way home with his window down, the cool night air doing little to calm the frantic beating of his heart. The incident hadn't just been weird. It had felt deliberate, intentional. The morning sun did little to dispel the chilling memory of the previous night. The rational part of Ethan's brain insisted it was faulty wiring, a short circuit, something mundane. But the feeling, the cold, deliberate intent he'd sensed, wouldn't fade. He called his friend Dave, who ran a small auto repair shop across town. Sounds like a sticky actuator, or maybe a bad ground in the locking system, Dave said cheerfully, after Ethan hesitantly described the event, carefully omitting the more paranoid-sounding details about intent. Bring it by, I'll take a look. Old car electrics, man, they get weird. At the garage, Dave spent a solid hour checking fuses, relays, and wiring harnesses connected to the door locks. He hooked up a diagnostic tool. Finally, wiping grease from his hands, he shrugged. Everything checks out, Ethan. Fuses are good, wiring looks intact, no fault codes. Probably just a one-time glitch. Maybe moisture got into a connection or something. I cleaned the contacts, shouldn't happen again. He clapped Ethan reassuringly on the shoulder. Don't sweat it, Ethan nodded, forcing a smile. He paid the small diagnostic fee, feeling slightly foolish but no less unsettled. He drove away, the sedan behaving perfectly, the locks responding instantly to the switch. Maybe Dave was right. Maybe it was just a glitch, but that night sleep wouldn't come easily. The image of the dark road, the sudden clunk of the locks, kept replaying in his mind. Driven by a restless unease he couldn't shake, he found the bill of sale with the car's VIN number and typed it into an online search engine. He scrolled through pages of generic vehicle history reports before a link caught his eye. A brief mention on an old archived local news forum. It was a post asking for information about a man named Michael Renfield, reported missing 6 months prior. He was last seen driving a blue sedan matching the year and model of Ethan's car. The post ended with a cryptic comment from another user. Heard they never found him, or the car, like they just vanished. A cold dread trickled down Ethan's spine. A glitch felt less likely now. Knowing the car's previous owner had vanished made every subsequent drive a tense affair. Ethan started noticing things he'd previously dismissed, his senses hyper-alert to every creak and groan of the old sedan. He avoided driving at night when possible, but his job often required late hours. The unsettling feeling that had started as a flicker was now a constant low hum of anxiety whenever he was behind the wheel. The radio became actively hostile. One afternoon, stuck in traffic, he switched it on out of boredom. Instead of music or news, a clear, desperate whisper sliced through the static. Stuck. Let me out. Startled, Ethan jammed the power button, his hand trembling slightly. He didn't turn it on again, but sometimes even when off, he thought he could hear faint, unintelligible murmurs coming from the speakers. The cold spots grew more pronounced. It wasn't just a general chill anymore. Specific areas within the car would suddenly plunge to an icy temperature, making him shiver violently despite the heater blasting. One morning, the air directly over the passenger seat grew so cold he could see his breath misting, dissipating as quickly as it appeared. He glanced over, half expecting to see someone sitting there. The seat was empty, but the feeling of a presence was undeniable. The most disturbing escalation involved the car's rudimentary GPS navigation, a feature he'd initially thought was a quaint bonus. Twice in 1 week, while he was driving in unfamiliar parts of the city, the screen flickered, the route abruptly changing. The calm, synthesized voice directed him off the main road, guiding him towards increasingly dilapidated neighborhoods. The first time, it tried to route him into a sprawling, overgrown cemetery, the voice insisting, "Turn left at the iron gates." Heart pounding, Ethan wrestled with the system, manually inputting his correct destination again and again until it finally reset, leaving him shaken. The second time, it guided him towards the deserted, rust-colored warehouses by the old docks, a known dead end. He managed to wrench the car back onto a main street, but the implication was terrifyingly clear. Something was trying to lead him somewhere dark, somewhere final. The car wasn't just glitching anymore, it felt like it was hunting. Ethan found himself driving less and less, making excuses, taking the dreaded bus whenever feasible. But one evening, a crucial deadline kept him chained to his desk hours past sunset. By the time he finally left the office, the sky had turned a bruised purple, the air thick and heavy with the promise of a storm. He cast a wary glance at the blue sedan, gleaming wetly under the parking lot lights, his stomach twisting. He had no choice tonight. He was barely halfway home when the heavens opened. Rain lashed down in blinding sheets, wind buffeting the car, thunder rattling the windows like angry fists. Visibility dropped to near zero. Ethan slowed, hands gripping the wheel, knuckles white, eyes straining to see the road. Then it happened. He felt the steering wheel jerk sharply in his grasp, turning firmly to the right as if guided by unseen hands. "No!" he yelled, fighting. But the car had momentum, tires skidding on the slick asphalt as it veered off the main road onto a narrow, unpaved track, swallowed by darkness. Mud sucked at the tires as the car lurched down the track, deeper into the trees, rain drumming relentlessly on the roof. Ethan stomped on the brake, yanked the wheel, but the car only plowed forward until, with a final shudder, the engine died. Silence descended, broken only by the storm's fury. The doors locked with their familiar, sickening clunk. The interior. Lights flickered, died, then glowed dimly, casting eerie shadows. An intense, bone-deep cold flooded the cabin, far colder than the storm outside. Ethan's breath plumed in front of him. He risked a glance at the passenger seat. It wasn't empty. A shimmering, translucent figure coalesced there, pale, gaunt, horribly familiar from the grainy missing person photo online. Michael Renfield. His eyes were dark pits of despair, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly for a moment, before a voice, layered and echoing as if spoken by many, filled the car, seeming to come from the radio, the vents, from everywhere at once. "Trapped. Like me, you feel it now. You're part of it. You'll help me." Raw terror, pure and undiluted, surged through Ethan. This wasn't a glitch. This was a prison, and its jailer was sitting beside him. Survival instinct kicked in. He fumbled under his seat, fingers closing around the small, heavy tire iron he'd started carrying. With a choked cry, he swung it with all his might against the passenger side window. It starred but held. Again. The glass exploded outwards in a shower of pellets and rain. Without a second thought, Ethan scrambled through the opening, tumbling out onto the sodden, muddy earth. He scrambled backwards on hands and knees, rain plastering his hair to his face, mud sucking at his clothes, until he reached the tree line. He looked back. The car sat dark and silent in the deluge, its broken window like a vacant eye. It was real, it was intelligent, and it wanted him. Ethan never remembered how he got home that night, only the shock-fueled adrenaline carrying him through miles of dark, rain-soaked roads until familiar streetlights appeared. He spent the next day huddled in his apartment, skipping work, jumping at every creak of the building. The terror was still fresh, but beneath it, a cold resolve was hardening. He couldn't run, he couldn't sell the car, he had to face it. He dove into research with frantic energy, moving past generic missing person reports into the darker corners of the internet. Paranormal forums, occult websites, digital archives of old local newspapers. He searched for Michael Renfield, the blue sedan, anything connected. Finally, buried in a digitized county record from 6 months prior, he found it. A brief coroner's report. Michael Renfield hadn't just disappeared. He'd been found dead inside the blue sedan, parked deep in the woods miles from his home. Cause of death: asphyxiation by carbon monoxide, ruled a suicide. Further digging unearthed whispers on decade-old forums mentioning Renfield's suspected involvement in an unsolved fatal hit-and-run accident a year before his death using the same car. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity: guilt, despair, a spirit trapped in the vessel of its final moments, and perhaps its crime. Desperate, Ethan tried sprinkling salt around the car in the parking lot, reciting protective phrases he'd found online. It felt absurdly inadequate, and the air around the sedan remained heavy, watchful. Nothing changed. Then he remembered the locket, the unnatural coldness, finding it jammed under the driver's seat track. Objects could hold attachments, the forum said, especially objects present during intense emotional events, like a suicide born of guilt. That was the anchor. His path became clear, terrifyingly simple. He had to get back into the car, retrieve the locket from the glove compartment where he'd tossed it, and destroy it. It was the only way. Steeling himself, breathing deeply against the fear coiling in his gut, he prepared for one last ride. Night had fallen again, thick and starless. Ethan approached the blue sedan parked under the weak glow of a distant streetlight. A small, heavy ball-peen hammer clutched tightly in his hand. Each step felt weighted, his breath catching in his throat. The air grew noticeably colder as he neared the car, the familiar metallic tang sharper in the darkness. He pulled the door handle. It opened silently. Steeling his nerves, he slid into the driver's seat. The oppressive weight of the car's interior immediately settled on him, heavy and suffocating. He reached for the glove compartment, his fingers fumbling with the latch. Inside, nestled amongst the owner's manual and old receipts, lay the tarnished silver locket. He snatched it up. It felt like ice against his skin. He placed it firmly on the passenger seat, raising the hammer, aiming for the delicate heart shape. Before the hammer could fall, the car exploded into malevolent life. The engine roared, turning over with a violence that shook the chassis. The doors slammed shut with the force of a gunshot, locks engaging hard. With no one touching the pedals or wheel, the car lurched backwards out of the parking space, tires squealing, then shot forward into the street. Ethan was thrown back against the seat. Lights flashed erratically, headlights, interior dome light, dashboard, blinding him. The horn began blaring incessantly, a deafening, continuous scream. The radio crackled, emitting not just whispers, but high-pitched shrieks and agonized groans that clawed at his ears. He scrambled for the locket as the car swerved wildly, tossing him side to side, the hammer skittering across the floor mats. He glimpsed Renfield's face, contorted in rage and desperation, flickering in the rearview mirror. The sedan hurtled down the dark street, swerving violently, narrowly missing parked cars. Ethan was slammed against the door, then the console, the blaring horn and screeching radio filling his head with noise. He spotted the hammer near the brake pedal. Lunging, dodging an invisible, icy pressure that tried to shove him back, he snatched it up, his other hand desperately clutching the freezing locket. Renfield's enraged face flashed in the rain-streaked windshield. Ignoring the pain as his shoulder hit the dashboard, Ethan braced himself, pinned the locket against the cracked plastic of the console, and brought the hammer down with all his strength. Crack! The silver heart shattered into jagged pieces. A deafening shriek erupted from the radio, impossibly loud, cutting through the din, before abruptly silencing. The horn died. The flashing lights extinguished, plunging the interior into near-total darkness, save for the faint glow of distant streetlights. The engine coughed, sputtered, and went silent. For a terrifying second, the car seemed to hang suspended, inertia still carrying it forward, but utterly lifeless. Then, gravity and momentum took over. The steering wheel spun uselessly as the sedan veered sharply off the road, launched over the curb, and slammed head-on into the thick trunk of an ancient oak tree with a sickening crunch of metal and shattering glass. Darkness, then pain, sharp and radiating through Ethan's chest and head. The coppery taste of blood filled his mouth. Disoriented, he blinked, trying to focus. The car was mangled, folded around the tree trunk, the windshield gone. Silence. Pressed in, profound and absolute after the earlier chaos, broken only by the faint ticking of cooling metal and the distant growing wail of sirens. He unbuckled his seatbelt, gasping, and somehow managed to wrench the twisted door open, half falling, half crawling out onto the damp grass. He looked back at the wreck, smoke or steam hissing faintly from the ruined engine. It was over. Flashing. Red and blue lights painted the scene, washing over Ethan as paramedics cautiously approached. He tried to explain, the words tumbling out between pained gasps, the car driving itself, the ghost of Renfield, the locket, the crash. But his fragmented story was met with patient nods and concerned glances exchanged between the police officers. The paramedics noted his concussion and shock. The official report would later mention excessive speed and loss of control due to driver disorientation, possibly influenced by unreported substances, though his tests came back clean. No one believed the truth. 2 months later, the physical injuries had mostly healed, but Riverport's humid air still felt heavy, charged with unseen currents Ethan hadn't noticed before arriving. He took the bus now, flinching at the screech of brakes or the sudden slam of a car door. He walked whenever possible, his eyes constantly scanning, searching for, he wasn't sure what. One grey afternoon, his route took him past a sprawling junkyard on the edge of town, and there it was, or what was left of it. The blue sedan, crushed almost beyond recognition, sat rusting atop a pile of other metallic corpses. As Ethan stared, a phantom chill traced its way up his spine. For just a fleeting moment carried on the wind, he thought he heard the faintest whisper of radio static. Then it was gone, leaving only the silence and the scars.